Today I want to talk about insulin resistance. It is said that 70% of the population today is insulin resistant. That means they're pre-diabetic. That means they can one day get diabetes. Now that is not something that you want. We all know that. And today I'm going to try to give you an analogy so that you can understand insulin and the role that it plays in the body. Now let's say we have a school, and that school has a lot of children that it educates. That school is functioning normally. And then all of a sudden, the amount of children that is in the area grows, let's say, tenfold. Now the school no longer has enough space to occupy all the children. And therefore, the school starts to become picky. It only wants the best learners. It doesn't want the weak performers. That is where insulin comes in. Insulin is a negotiator. And the pupils are glucose. And the school itself is the cell inside your body. Now let's think about this. If you have too much glucose, the glucose struggles to enter the cell because the cell is already saturated. Therefore, your pancreas creates a hormone called insulin to go into the cell and negotiate with the cell to accept more glucose. Exactly the same as the analogy of the school. We have the negotiator that goes to the principal and tells him, please accept more students because this will be more beneficial for the community. And eventually, the school reluctantly agrees. Now, if you only need one negotiator that only needs to go and have a 1-minute conversation, that is called being insulin sensitive. So your cells react very well to insulin, and it easily listens to the hormone. But if you need to send 5 or 6 negotiators to go speak to the principal, and they all have to have a 2-hour conversation, that is called insulin resistant. Your body becomes resistant to insulin, therefore you need to create more, to negotiate more of the cells to allow the glucose into the cell. Now let's take a look at this analogy. Why does the school not want to have many pupils? Well, it's easy. It's damaging to the school. If it allows in too many pupils, windows start to break, tables start to break, and the teachers become overwhelmed. So as long as there are enough schools to meet all the demands of all the pupils, we don't have a problem, and insulin isn't required. So let's think of those schools again, because a school is just a cell, and we can increase the amount of cells that we have in the body. The easiest way to do this is to build muscle, because we can't really increase the size of our heart, but we can increase the size of our muscles. So if you do resistance training, you're going to have more muscle tissue, and therefore you're going to have more cells which glucose can go into, and thus reducing the demand for insulin, because there's more schools to go to, so insulin doesn't have to negotiate as hard because you have less glucose in your bloodstream. But the primary thing that is the most essential is you must reduce the amount of glucose in your system. The only way to do this is you must eat less carbs. By eating less carbs, the amount of glucose in your blood starts to lower. And when you have less carbs and less glucose in your system, you don't need as much insulin to go and negotiate. Thus, your cells become more insulin sensitive and not insulin resistant. Let's think of someone who is diabetic, who takes insulin on a daily basis. What happens is in the beginning, one negotiator went to speak for 5 minutes. Now, there's 10 negotiators that need to speak for 10 hours before the school lets glucose into the cell. Now the pancreas can't create any more insulin. It's already at maximum capacity. So people inject themselves with more insulin, thus more negotiating power. Now we have 500 negotiators going to talk for 10 hours. The school has no option but to cave in and allow the pupils into the cell. But this is just the cycle that makes it worse and worse and worse and worse, because you need more and more and more and more insulin. If we can just reduce the amount of glucose in the cell, we can start to lower the amount of insulin that we need. Another thing that we need to mention is the school's capacity to educate learners, because this education process is actually just the conversion process from glucose to ATP. And to get ATP, we need to have mitochondria. Now, someone who is unfit, lazy, sitting all day, does not have a lot of mitochondria. They just have enough to survive. Where someone who is ultra fit, who is an ultra endurance marathon runner, they have a ton of mitochondria. They have about 1,000 times more mitochondria per cell than someone who is lazy. This means there's 1,000 times more teachers to educate the pupils, to turn the pupils into energy. Thus, the amount of glucose that your cells can process increases a lot, and this reduces the amount of insulin that you need. Because if we have enough cells to load in all the glucose, we don't need insulin. So, let's summarize. If you don't want to become insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, you need to do 3 things. You need to build muscle, you need to become fit, and you also need to eat less carbs and more fat and more protein. My name has been Jonathan, and I will see you in the next episode.